Hi, it's Jill Schlesinger, host of Better Off, and today we're talking about risks that exist in the government.
There are 5 times more people working in the civil service who are over the age of 60 than there are under the age of 30. Most of the technology is ancient, and we're throwing a lot of money to kind of trying to keep legacy systems kind of chugging along when really where they need new systems.
Welcome to the Better Off podcast. We're sponsored by Betterment, the largest independent online financial advisor. Well, we're dropping this on the Thursday before the midterms. And while we are not really a political podcast by any stretch of the imagination, we're more of a money podcast. What's fascinating is to hear just what has occurred in the last couple of years at various parts of the government. And for that, we have a special guest, a return guest, Michael Lewis. You know him as the best-selling author of The Undoing Project. That was the one about the behavioral finance, Liar's Poker, Flash Boys, Moneyball, The Blind Side, The Big Short, you know, all that stuff. His new book is called The Fifth Risk, and it really goes deep into 3 different departments of the federal government to see what has gone on in the last 2 years. So here's our interview with Michael Lewis.
You're listening to Better Off with Jill Schlesinger.
Michael Lewis, welcome back to the program. How are you?
Never better.
Never better. That's amazing. So the first time you were on, we were talking about behavioral finance, which is one of my favorite topics. The second time you were on, we were talking about one of your articles that you had written. And now one of those articles joined another article in this new book called The Fifth Risk. So I got to say, I'm a little depressed reading this book.
Yeah.
You're bringing me down.
Yeah, well, so I could argue with that.
All right.
I can argue with that emotion.
Hold on. Before you do that, let me interject one thing. I shouldn't say this because I think we have a lot of federal employees who listen to the program. And so what got me down was just an absolute disregard for how professional so many of these people are.
You're not just professional, passionate.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that should get you up. This society has kind of dumped on the federal workforce for the last 3 decades. The political process sells this idea that they're lazy or stupid or not incentivized properly, or it's just it's a drag on the government's a drag on the society. Every time one of those political people actually gets in a position of having to, run the Department of Energy, or encounter the Department of Agriculture, or have a conversation with the Department of Transportation, they always come away saying, I can't believe how good those people are. And the book is laced with people who've come out of the private sector. Goldman Sachs, who comes out of 4 years at the Department of Energy saying, the most talented, dedicated group of people I've ever worked with.
Amazing data scientists who are filling the organizations that are really helping us shape the future.
So this is the hopeful message, that in spite of the way we've treated that enterprise, the federal government, there's still enough mission-driven, dedicated people who are attracted to the really important job of running the society, that they're there. It's not completely dark, this story. And I think it's a tribute to the culture that it generates these people. And that's the happy story.
So you went through and looked at 3 huge departments: agriculture, commerce, and energy.
Right.
And what made you focus on those 3, first of all?
So I started with all of them on the floor of my office with manila folders in the name of, transportation, state, education, justice, treasury, blah, blah, blah. There are 15 of them.
Right.
And I eliminated the ones that weren't actually all that important. And that's hard to do because everything's somewhat important. They're all there for a reason. But the Department of Education is pretty small.
Right. It's usually state level.
And it's state level
right.
stuff. So so I was able to get rid of a couple on that basis, and a few on the basis that they were being paid attention to. The EPA, justice, state. So I didn't think it was necessary to focus people's attention, because the point of the book is, even in places where you don't think anything's going on that you need to worry about, there are really serious things going on you need to worry about. And then after that, I sort of let the characters guide me. I found jungle guides who really brought things to life. And then the question was where to stop, because there were another 4 or 5 departments I could have done in the same vein, but I felt like what you want to do is just get the reader to the point where they understand the problem.
And so when you outline risks, it's so interesting because, there are obvious risks. Oh, there will be a nuclear reactor that melts down. There will be a climate event that is engulfing some part of the country. And part of the government's responsibility is to prepare for these risks. And you would tick off different risks with people, and then you come to the fifth risk. And the fifth risk is?
Well, think about the way you move through life. It happens over and over and over. You're worried each day about a few things. You're worried about, your kids. You're worried about being late to work or whatever it is. And what comes and bites you is usually something that you weren't worrying about. The mere fact you were worrying about it means you're probably paying more attention to it than you should have. It's the stuff you're not paying attention to. This is true of the society in relation to the federal government. We're not paying enough attention to it. But within the government, the people who are running it, they're not paying much attention to a lot of big things that they're just not imagining things going wrong. They could go wrong. So, for example, the Agriculture Department runs the nutrition programs in the country. It really should be called either the Department for Food or maybe the Department for Rural, because a lot of it's focused on rural America. There is now this insidious movement to debase the school lunch programs, to put stuff in there because food companies want it in there, sweetened milk or stuff that would be bad for kids. I mean, the leverage that's in that program. I mean, tens of millions of people are on the receiving end of the food that comes out of there. If you screw up that, you create nutritional problems. That's a big deal.
And what's also interesting is that when you think about that risk, which is the risk of something, either a future risk, climate change is a good example, or the small risk, it's also that it just brings up behavioral finance to me because our brains don't like to focus on risk. It's as if to say that, you don't want to think about this thing that could be a horrible thing because we don't like to go there. And yet, without anyone concentrating on that risk, it doesn't make it go away.
It's really true that behavioral economics or psychologists have a lot to say about the current situation. And what they have to say is that our minds do not accurately judge probabilities. So we focus on the big, vivid risks. That we're constantly worried about terrorism. Two big, broad themes in American life. We're worried about attacks from outside when actually the most dangerous things are within.
Well, it's my best example of that is I had a friend who said to me, I said, I want to go to Israel next year. And my friend Steven says to me, I'm scared to go to Israel. I'm like, okay, you drive back and forth on the LIE every day, on the Long Island Expressway every day. That's what you should be scared about. Yeah. You should not be scared about someone's going to bomb your LL flight to Tel Aviv. It's just probability-wise, not going to happen.
Absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
But you can't think that way. People have a hard time considering those risks. Why?
That's why we have a government.
Yeah,
it does it for us.
Except when it doesn't. Right. So let's talk a little bit about the Department of Commerce, which is, you say, ill-named.
Yes, it should be called the Department of Data. It's not where all government data resides, but a shocking amount of it. The census is taken there. All the economic statistics are accumulated there. And surprisingly, all weather and climate data is there because the National Weather Service is there. Piles of information that tell us about the society that you find nowhere else. Without the Department of Commerce, we don't know who we are as a people.
We don't know
our environment.
Right. We don't know the environment. We don't know about the economy. We don't know about the various the census and what is going on in there.
But these numbers are roughly right. That if the Department of Commerce spends $9 billion a year, I bet $5 billion of it is spent just accumulating weather data. It's more.
I love that.
So that who knew, right? And certainly they didn't know. The thing that was, as I got into it, was most disturbing is you realize there's this really pretty socially critical function, the National Weather Service. It is the source of enormous progress. You don't realize this, but your weather forecasts are far, far better today than they were 10, 20, or 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. The weather forecasts have gotten better and better and better. Hurricane tracking, better and better and better. The possibility of tornado prediction, more and more and more likely. And the warning times have gotten a little better. That service has saved lots of lives and protected lots of property. And it's inherently a public good. No private company has the resources or the incentive to gather all the data that one needs in the world in order to make a really good weather forecast. And in addition, it requires international agreements because you need data from all over the planet. So this thing, with this data that's so valuable, makes all that data freely available to the American people and to companies that want to churn it and see if they can find better ways to predict the weather. The guy that Trump has nominated to run this operation is the CEO of AccuWeather.
So it sounds like, oh, he's got expertise. This must be the one area where Michael Lewis is going to tell me, thank goodness, he at least is in an associated business. And yet,
well, there are two problems. One, it's that what he's in charge of is a big science operation, and actually he's a lawyer. And second, the bigger problem is, for the last 2 decades, he's been on a mission to gum up the National Weather Service's communication with the American people, because if the National Weather Service doesn't communicate the weather well, people will pay AccuWeather more one way or another to do so. So he's got a private interest in the thing being dismantled.
And let me quote Michael Lewis, because I love this paragraph. Pause a moment to consider the audacity of that maneuver. A private company whose weather predictions were totally dependent on the billions of dollars spent by the U.S. taxpayer to gather the data necessary for those predictions, and on decades of intellectual weather work sponsored by the U.S. taxpayer, and on international data sharing treaties made on behalf of the U.S. taxpayer, and on the very forecast that the National Weather Service generated, was in effect trying to force the U.S. taxpayer to pay all over again for what the National Service might be able to tell him or her for free.
And this is not a trivial thing. This is not a matter of whether you bring a sweater on a trip. This is life and death stuff. That the North American continent has the most interesting diabolical weather on the planet.
Of course, until there is a disaster and you have a response to that disaster, you don't pay attention to it, right?
That is a big part of the problem. I mean, I think this is peculiarly our society. How little we prepare for disaster compared to how good we are after it. We're really good after a disaster.
Yes.
Everybody rallies. We're really, really good. It's moving. We make great TV after disasters. People are helping people. But we really are not very good at preparing.
This is Better Off with Jill Schlesinger.
We'll get back to our interview with Michael Lewis in just a minute. I just want to shift away from the risk in the government, something that you really can't control, to the risk in your own life. I think that for many people, they go along, they get along, and they don't really look at these risks in their financial lives. That's kind of what the average person does. But you're not the average investor. So why are you settling for the same old average investing? There's a smarter way to manage your money. Betterment. Betterment is an online financial advisor for people who refuse to settle for average. You're not average. You're listening to the show. Come on. Betterment uses cutting-edge technology to build personalized portfolios and help you make more from your investments. Then they guide you along the way with advice to help you make smart financial decisions. And all of this for one low, transparent fee. Of course, investing does involve risk. Better Off listeners can get up to 1 year managed free by visiting betterment.com/betteroff. That's betterment.com/betteroff. And now back to our interview with the extraordinarily above average Michael Lewis. It's funny, I recently interviewed a guy named Adam Tooze who wrote this massive volume of the history of the financial crisis, right? So 10 years later, it's called Crashed. And one of the things that he talked about was, in response to the bubble bursting and all the horrible things that happened, that it was like this weird period of time where you had this very small window where everyone was working together to try to figure out how to solve a problem. And it's not unlike any other disaster that hits, but then it fades. And then we go back and start going to our corners and pointing fingers. I guess that one of the big questions I have is that you raise these huge issues, and I wonder how much at risk are we as a country that some of the best and brightest are going to get frustrated. I have a family member who used to work at Department of Housing. She says, I'm here, I'm staying with it, I'm doing it. And then she's like, I can't do this. She actually went to a nonprofit organization where she thought that she could do better work. So how do we prevent people from leaving?
I mean, this is a problem that's been boiling for a while, right? It's been simmering. Now it's on boil. What happens? I think what's got to happen is a big rethink in the story we tell ourselves about that place, and a big redesign of the enterprise itself. The pay system's antiquated. It takes 106 days on average to hire somebody in a government job. there are 5 times more people working in the civil service who are over the age of 60 than there are under the age of 30.
Whoa.
It's almost like a mirror image of a Wall Street investment bank that where it's all run by kids. There's an analogous story to tell about the technology, that most of the technology is ancient, and we're throwing a lot of money to kind of trying to keep legacy systems kind of chugging along when really where they need new systems. So the whole sector requires a lot of investment, but also a rethink, because I think here's what I would say, when you know things are getting better, when young people want to go work for it. And they don't want to do that right now. So I'd almost say task someone with, you're czar of federal employment. Your job is to change this place so it's an attractive place for young people to work. And I think all the things they would do to do that would fix a lot of the problems.
So it's kind of an argument for more of a technocrat who's going to come in and kick some ass and move this needle to a place where we have a more modern and responsive government.
You've got to give him a big bullhorn, because politicians need to be scared of him. The senators need to say, yeah, we'll do that. We understand, because he's explaining it to us. A leader, he can come in various forms, but what's needed is leadership on the issue.
All right, I got to get more upbeat about this. Okay, so there are great people. I just had my stomach hurts right now. So there are great people in the government. We need to reshape government. You have to, and everybody who's listening, stop slamming the government and people and government employees. That's a good place to start.
Not a bad place to start.
Look
for the bright spots, because it is extraordinary what the best of them do is more important than virtually what anybody in the economy is doing. I mean, there are a couple of exceptions, but there are extraordinary points of leverage within the government, and they're extraordinarily passionate. They're firefighters. I mean, these are people who are mission-driven people. You have to keep in mind that the vast majority of them could be making more money outside of the public sector. And they're there doing what they're doing, working in a poverty program or working with nuclear weapons or working with census data, because they care about that thing. And that feeling is precious. We ought to encourage it.
Before I let you go, let's talk about the Oakland A's.
Yeah, sorry about that.
What happened? I mean, Moneyball, your Moneyball team seems to keep showing up and not winning when it matters.
Are you saying it's my fault?
No, I'm not suggesting it's your fault. I'm saying that I've
misled the American people?
Pretty much. Also, you had to write the book, and then you also had to have a movie. And why can't the thinly funded Oakland A's win beyond the first round of the playoffs? Michael Lewis, speak to that now.
Because the gods want people to have the opportunity not to believe in what they're doing. I think that what you're dealing with there is some chance. But the truth is, look, they're playing the Yankees. They aren't as good a team as the Yankees. The better team won. It's amazing they got as close as they did.
All right.
That's how I think about it.
All right. That's a very gentle way to put it. Please come back anytime you're in New York.
All right.
And everybody listening, the book is called The Fifth Risk. We'll have a link to it so you can buy many copies of it. I don't know how we make this into a movie, Michael.
Well, actually, it's already been bought.
Yeah?
Yeah, and it's I can't tell you how it's going to be done. Darn it! But it will be done. It won't be done as a movie.
A doc.
It'll be done as a very odd movie-like documentary. 15 episodes. So,
congratulations.
Thank
Mazel tov. Thank you for coming in, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
You're listening to Better Off with Jill Schlesinger.
After our interview segment, we do talk to you, and we have our listener question of the week. I love answering these questions. It is actually really kind of immerses me in your lives and makes me feel like I'm useful to you. And if you'd like some help with your financial situation, all you have to do is send us an email. Ask Jill at betteroffpodcast.com. Ask Jill at betteroffpodcast.com. 2 chances every week to get on the air. So that is what you need to do. That's what Susan did. She is on the line from Pennsylvania. Hi, Susan. Welcome to the show. What can I do for you?
So I have a question for you about a non-deductible traditional IRA that we started for my husband about 8 years ago. We kind of did it on the side, on our own, separate from what we have done with our financial planner. And we've been maxing it out, including catch-up contributions every year. He's now retired. We're still contributing to it because I'm still working. And I kind of realized a few years after we started it that we probably should have been doing backdoor Roth conversions all along. And now it's up to about $85,000. About 29 of that is gains. And I just don't know if it's still possible to convert it. Is it worth it to convert it? It's not a huge part of our world, but I just have this feeling like we could regret it if we could have and we didn't.
Well, I just want to make sure I understand this. All of the money that's in this account, it's all non-deductible contributions, right?
Yes.
So
he was working, maxing out his employer-sponsored 401k, and our income was too high to do a Roth. And so this was like just sort of a way to put money away and have it grow without taxes. But it is after-tax money in there.
Okay.
It's just seems like you're supposed to like put it in and flip it right away. And obviously,
well, along the way, it would have been probably slightly easier. But I don't really necessarily see that there's a big downside to having a non-deductible contribution that you've made and leaving it alone necessarily.
Okay.
I guess what I'm wondering is this. Did your husband, when he retired, did he roll over his 401k or 403b? And he did. And so he now has a traditional IRA, correct?
Correct.
I think that's going to screw you up. I think that's going to be the problem. There's this really, okay, so this is so annoying, but I'm sorry to do it to you, but here we go. But anyway, there's this kind of strange pro rata rule that if you have money that has not been taxed and you've got this money in a traditional IRA, in order to then move things into a Roth environment, you would have to basically treat everything like one big IRA for this purpose.
Oh.
So I don't think you should do this. I don't think there's a huge downside of keeping it as is. It's non-deductible. Keep good records. Don't commingle this for any reason. But I don't see why there's a big downside. Let me ask you another question because I'm just nosy and I can do this, right? And I have a microphone. Why are you doing this on the sly? You don't like your financial advisor?
That's sort of the bigger.
Thank you very much.
We like her. We trust her. We've worked with her now for 15 or 16 years. And as I personally have become more educated, I have had this sick feeling that we've probably lost lots of money to fees and loaded funds, et cetera. And the compromise that he and I have kind of reached for the moment, and neither of us is opposed to wholesale pulling everything out and moving it to a Vanguard where we have money there as well. But what we've compromised at the moment is we're not contributing any new monies to her. Like I just opened a solo 401k this year. I made sure that my employee contributions are going to the Roth, and then my employer contributions will be pre-tax. And we're still, we've kind of finished college funding, which she's managed. That's done. And we're just kind of trying to put new money into much cheaper index funds with Vanguard. But
okay.
That's why I haven't gone to her about this, because we kind of did it on our own, and it was like
you cheated on her. You went behind her back. It's like you were cheated on your advisor. All right, how much money do you have with the advisor?
About 1.7.
And you have basically paid for her advisory services by paying a commission or an asset under management fee?
It seems to be a little bit of a blend. Like the funds that she puts us in are loaded funds, like with American or Franklin Templeton, JP Morgan Chase, those kinds of things. And then her firm has like a fee. They have these different clusters of, I don't like platforms, I guess they call them. So, and it's kind of frustrating because really neither of us is uncomfortable doing it ourselves, and we've been building up the money we have with Vanguard too. It's just, I don't know.
You don't want to break up with her. You know that you're in a bad marriage, and you don't want to break up with her, but the kids are already gone. I mean, there's no waiting around for that, right? Listen, I don't want to get into your infidelity of your advisory services, but it sounds like you're very smart. You're managing your money. You're taking control. You don't seem particularly afraid of this idea of managing a couple $1,000,000, which is kind of what she's doing. My suggestion to you is this. There are ongoing fees that are associated with some of these funds, and some of them might be worth keeping. But to pay someone for services that you are not really utilizing, especially when it's mostly asset management services, you could go to a lot of places and pay a fraction of that just to get a allocated portfolio for yourself. You don't have to pay commission, and probably the ongoing fee is a lot less. So I am going to encourage you to take this moment of the questioning on your conversion of a non-deductible IRA to a Roth IRA, and to just use this as a prompt to say, well, wait a minute, what are we doing? How much is this really costing us? I mean, do you like her enough to spend an extra 10 or 15 grand a year that you don't need to spend? Like, that's a really good advisor. For 10 or 15 grand, I'd have to really think that person is lending value to my life. And if not, I think it's incumbent on you guys to sort of bite the bullet and say, you know what are we afraid of? We can do this ourselves. We already have a relationship with Vanguard. We know what we're doing. And I don't know, it's like kind of throwing money out the window that you may not need to be doing.
Yeah. Well, and I don't, the fees, like, I know they have to provide reports, but it never is really that clear to me. I have observed, like, what I can go on Vanguard's website and look at, and the charts, and the way I can see gains, and the way I can just see the expenses. It's so much more transparent than through this advisory company. And it's like, they're kind of an umbrella with all these different funds under it. I do kind of worry, like, we just rolled my husband's 401k over there less than a year ago. Like, do you think we paid a bunch of money, like loads, when we did that?
You may have. I mean, look, I think it's fair to say to this person, look, we are re-examining our financial life. My husband is now retired. Blame it on him and say, you know what? He really feels comfortable. He would like to take over the management of the assets because, he's got the time to do it. How much did we pay when we rolled this money in? You can ask. You are entitled to ask that question. Yeah. It's such a weird thing. It's very embarrassing sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, you feel like weird because on one hand, this is at least how I feel. Like, on one hand, you're like, oh, I really should have known that, but I don't. And so now I feel weird that I don't know it. And then I feel like I'm asking this question of this advisor, and she's like, why are you asking this question? But you know what? In any other instance, you wouldn't get into a car dealership, drive the car off the lot, and be like, but what did I pay for that car?
Yeah, how much was it?
How much? Yeah, wait, what? So I think it's fair to ask that. If you want somebody to take a look at it on your behalf, what you may want to do is have someone who is a fee-only planner, meaning someone who might say, I'll charge you $1,000 to go through and look at this account for you, give you the best advice, and with every idea that you will go handle this in the future, that they're never going to try to sell you their services beyond that. If that's something you want, it may be possible to get that kind of analysis. And there are plenty of people who would do that. So, I mean, you can go to NAPFA, which is the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, NAPFA.org, or what I can do is I can, if you stay on the line, I can have Mark get you some information, and I can send you somebody who's maybe not be exactly where you live, but close enough by where you could have like a phone call and get some feedback. But okay. I'm pretty sure from what you're describing, you're paying more than you probably should for the services that you are being delivered. And I think that that's a fair reason to reassess whether or not you want to continue the relationship.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm 43. I'm going to be working and contributing to these funds and that's why I kind of stopped contributing to my retirement with her, and I opened my 401k at Vanguard because I thought I got to stop the bleeding, but there's still the old wounds.
Yeah, I know. So look, let maybe a second opinion right here, or again, the second opinion is just to make you feel better. I have this great sense that you know what the answer is, so I'm going to leave it with you there. And if you need any help along the way, you let us know, okay?
All right, and can I ask you one more thing?
Why not?
My IRA. So this year, we've still been putting the money, this is the first full year he hasn't been employed. And so we've been putting it, I kind of tease him, it's his housewife IRA. But we've been putting it in the same one. Next year, should we open up a new traditional IRA for him or just keep doing the non-deductible?
Nah, I would do that. How much money do you make?
About $250.
No, I mean, taxes are pretty low. Tax brackets are pretty low. So pay the tax and throw it in the non-deductible. I think that's better.
Okay. and we'll just keep keeping
on. You're in the 24% tax bracket. You can make up to $315,000 married filing jointly in that tax bracket. I don't think you're going to be in a lower tax bracket when you retire. And by the way, while he is being a dilettante and retired, while you're toiling away, make him make him do some work and be the money manager. Okay.
Yeah, and I think he would. I mean, we both enjoy it, so I don't think he would have a problem with that.
Excellent. Fire your advisor instead of cheating. Okay.
All right.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Take care. Thanks again to Michael Lewis, who is now a third-time guest on the Better Off podcast, which I think is a record so far, and also to our caller, Susan. We drop new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday. If you'd like to get on the air with us, don't forget you can always send us an email. It's very easy. Ask Jill at betteroffpodcast.com. Ask Jill at betteroffpodcast.com. Our music is composed by Joel Goodman. Mark Talercio is our executive producer extraordinaire. We're distributed by Cadence 13, and we're sponsored by Betterment. See you next week.